Welcome to r/Am I the Jerk, where a wild Karen is reselling thrift store clothes. Am I the jerk for taking all of the clothes in my size off the rack so resellers couldn't grab everything before I looked? Last week I had time and I stopped into a thrift store and they were just putting out stuff from their truck. I'm never so lucky to be there when that happens. The shops are always very picked over with just Old Navy or Target clothes whenever I get there, so I was happy that I might actually find something this time. I started browsing normally and I was finding some good stuff for once. Then I saw a group of 3 women walk in. One had a little computer for scanning books. The other 2 had iPads or something like that. I assumed to check the resale prices. Either way, they were clearly resellers and they started grabbing stuff after checking labels. I felt a sense of dread because I wouldn't be fast enough to check, so I just swooped everything off the rack and into my cart in my size. When the 2 got to me, they started staring. I asked, "What?" And one of them was like, "We'd like to be able to see what's on the rack too." I said that they could as soon as I was done. She scoffed at me and said, "That's rude. We'd like a chance to shop these clothes too." I just ignored her and started looking at things one by one, taking my time, then putting them right back on the rack. The women were getting mad and snatching things basically out of my hand. I held up a nice top and one of them tried grabbing it out of my hand and I said, "Excuse you," and turned my back to her. They got all upset and one stomped away to get a worker. The worker came over and asked what was going on. I said I was looking at the items from the rack, same as anyone else. They said I was hoarding everything, so they couldn't get a chance to look. The worker said that I wasn't doing anything wrong and then said to me, "Thank you for putting everything back when you're done." I finished what I was doing with the women breathing down my neck and took my clothes to go try on. One of them kept following me and asked me what my problem was, why I was being such a jerk, etc. I said, "Sorry that you're having a bad day, but it's really not my problem." Am I the jerk? I just wanted the chance to be able to find some nice clothes for once. From my point of view, I didn't do anything different than people who fill up their carts and go try on everything. Plus, I didn't even take all of the good clothes to begin with. Not the jerk. I donate a lot of nice clothing because I would like others who can't easily afford them to get them. Not so someone else can swoop in and sell my clothes for their profit. Sure, they're allowed to, but I'm okay with you grabbing the stuff in your size first over resellers. Plus, they had every other size to choose from. Now, if these were other women trying to shop for themselves, that would be a little bit different. Not the jerk. I'm pretty judgy about thrift resellers in general, but they would have done exactly the same thing you did if they had been there before you. The only difference is they would have been slightly more selective based on their researches. So, not the jerk. Kudos to the store employee for having your back. I hope you got some good finds. Not the jerk. Resellers have ruined thrifting. I've been thrifting for 15 years, and I used to find great stuff in my size all the time. Now it's just leftover Shein junk. They are the same as landlords in my opinion, and there are way more ethical professions. Not the jerk. Those people are the scourge of the charity community. Rather than supporting a place for people to buy needed items for cheaper, they look for profit. They take people's charitable donations and treat it like their business. "At least it's getting sold" is a silly argument. It's the equivalent of going to a farmer the day of harvest, buying all the best looking products for cheap, then reselling it at 50 to 100 times the price. It's messed up. They got huffy because you're stealing their profit. I absolutely loathe and detest the bottom feeders. You're the jerk. You're not entitled to first dibs on everything, and resellers prevent people from shopping fast fashion if they need something specific. Stop being jealous and gatekeeping secondhand stores. You're the jerk. I thrift often, and I would never do this petty crap. Also, you have no idea if they were resellers or not. You just assumed based on their vibe. Also, the fact that they approached you about it makes this story sketchy. You definitely took way more clothes than you're saying. Otherwise, no confrontation would have occurred. Everyone gets to thrift, not just you. Am I the jerk for forcing my fiancé to cut off contact with his late wife's family? I, 25 female, am getting married to my fiancé, 29 male, in May. When we first got together, he told me that he had been married from 20 to 22 years old to his high school sweetheart. We met when he was 25, but she had passed from sepsis from a botched surgery. He didn't cope well and stayed in contact with her family, namely father and 2 sisters, who are 19 and 24. It was a soft spot for me for a while at the beginning because there was so much history they had that we would not have, and it was tough knowing that she was all around him. I never told him and decided to work through it on my own, especially with the fact that he would often spend time with her family during our relationship. Her birthday, their anniversary, and anniversary of her passing, he'd spend the day with her family. It was uncomfortable at first, knowing the man I loved was reminiscing about the love that he had with someone else, but I kept trying to see it from his perspective, and the last couple of years, I'm completely secure in our relationship, and it doesn't bother me much anymore. Well, he proposed this time last year, and I was over the moon. I love this man with all of my heart, but I recently learned that he had never told them that we got engaged. I've been trying local coffee shops the past few months rather than my usual one, and I tried this new one. His late wife's sister worked there, and other than being awkward, she did a double take of my engagement ring and looked really unhappy. I didn't mention it and left. My fiancé told me that she kept messaging him on social media about it, and I wasn't happy that he kept it a secret. He apologized and was very depleted by this. He said that he didn't want to hide me, but he didn't want to hurt them either, and that both of us were a huge part of his life. I understand that, and I let him off the hook slightly, just told him to be upfront with them from now on. That was that, or at least I thought it was. A week ago, on Sunday, I got a message from the 24-year-old asking if I was happy with myself, that I would never replace his late wife, and that if she were still alive, he'd choose her over me every time. She even said that he only kept me around for my money and to use me. I ignored it, but I can't say that it didn't affect me. When you're in my position, all these points are ones you have to work through, and it's not easy to get over those insecurities. It feels like a knock to the teeth when they're used against you. I mentioned it to him, and he comforted me and reassured me. He said that he had set boundaries with her, and I'd never have to hear from her again. Fine by me. That was until I found my car with names smeared into the red paint, like grave robber. I had saved for this car for a year, and it was expensive, very expensive. The tires were slashed and the windows were cracked. I asked the store a few doors down for their CCTV camera footage of that night, but it was blurry and didn't catch much. It did manage to catch half a license plate though, and the color and make of a car. It was his late wife's youngest sister's car. I told him I was filing a police report, and he asked me to hold off until he talked to them first. I told him no, but I would if they paid for the damages and apologized to my face. He set up the meeting for last night, and it didn't go well to say the least. Everyone was shouting. The sisters told me they, yes, both of them, had nothing to be sorry for, and that I should leave their family alone, including my fiancé and their family. He told them that it wasn't fair to him to be lonely forever, and that he had hoped they'd be supportive of him finding love again. They told him he was betraying late wife, and that he never loved her if he'd marry someone else. They didn't have a problem with him having a new girlfriend because he had realized she was the only one for him and get tired of me. Now that hadn't happened, they were putting their foot down. The youngest told him to tell me that they were right and that he'd never love anyone else like late wife. My fiancé broke down at the table. I picked him up and made us leave. I told them I'd be filing a report and suing for damages, and the next time they saw us would be in court. When we got back and calmed down, I gave him an ultimatum. Either he cuts contact or we call off the wedding and go our separate ways. I wasn't going to live my life with this harassment and someday subject my kids to their bullying. He said they would never bully a kid, but I shot him down and said he didn't expect any of this either. He called their father, who was fairly chill about it all, but still defending his daughters. They say I shouldn't control him and that I'm horrible for cutting them off. I don't know what to do. I can't live like this, and I don't think I should have to just because we're getting married. Is the ring he gave you the same one he gave her? OP. No, the ring is actually my late grandmother's engagement ring. He asked my father if he could give it to me when he asked for his blessing. As weird as it sounds, I think the grave robber bit was about me stealing him from her grave. At least that's all I can get from it. I wouldn't be surprised if the 24-year-old is hoping to get with him. OP. A few people are saying this, and I'm creeped out by it. They play Dungeons and Dragons together once a week, and now I'm panicking. Did they continue to play after she sent that message to you? OP. No, he didn't attend this week's session to my knowledge. I just meant plays, as they're in the same campaign with 3 other people. I don't know what goes on there, and after what people are saying, I don't think I want to know. Why do you even want to be with him when there's this drama? OP. I see what everyone is saying, but it's not easy to turn off your love for someone. I'm seeing it now. Obviously, I don't want to be harassed and have my things ruined. I would prefer all of this to be cordial, but that's not the world I live in. If it were easy to flip the switch, I would have started packing on Sunday when I got the message, and he would have flipped the switch at his late wife's funeral. I may have been too patient until now, but that doesn't mean I'm weak. This is the crossroads, and I'm ready to take whichever path I have to. Let's hope he's ready too. Where are his parents in this? OP. They were old parents, in their late 40s when they had my fiancé, so they've retired, and he never wants to bother them with anything. I doubt they even know about any of this. I might bring up that he needs to get their input because the way they're treating him is gross and wrong. Update the next day. I didn't sleep at all yesterday or the night before, for obvious reasons. There's a ding on my phone at least once an hour from them saying one thing or another, mainly the 19-year-old, and I don't know what they've told people, but I've got messages from one of their uncles and grandparents calling me names too. So obviously, they've been spreading what's happened this week and twisting it. I haven't blocked them because I want to gain as much evidence as I can for the inevitable case. Regardless of any outcome with my fiancé, I will be suing and filing a criminal case for harassment and vandalism, and I'm looking for a restraining order. I just haven't had the mental fortitude to do so yet. I'm hoping my fiancé will help me. I haven't spoken to my fiancé since the argument at the table, other than to tell him that they go or I do. It was my choice to give him a couple days space to come to terms with everything, and I will contact him when I'm ready. All of this, from the first message until now, has been a week. It's a huge weight to contemplate leaving people you've known for 15 years and who you grew up with. He did set hard boundaries with the sister from the coffee shop, as I've seen the messages. He said, paraphrasing, "You have no right talking to OP at all if this is how you're going to behave. She doesn't deserve this, and you've gone too far. Why are you being like this?" And she responded with more name-calling and back and forth. He ended by saying not to message me again and to make sure everyone else does the same. I was happy with that. At this point, only one person in that family had an issue, to my knowledge, so it was silly to have him cut off all of them. It may not be enough for some, but it was enough for me to feel safe and comfortable. For those saying he needs therapy and counseling, he's already getting it. He's been getting it since before we even started dating after an incident at work. I don't know about any of their family though. The first time I had a conversation with any of them was that night. I also want to clear up the not calling the police about the car thing. It was entirely my idea to not file charges in exchange for a face-to-face apology and damage payment. He only wanted me to wait so that he could talk to her to see if she regretted it and then have her father pay the damages. At the time, we thought it was just the 19-year-old that smashed my car, not both daughters. Neither of us wanted to ruin her life. When I found out it was both of them, it was full-on steam ahead. Update 2. My fiancé came over bright and early this morning, and I've never been so tired. First of all, I want to set the record straight here. A lot of people are coming for my fiancé over not cutting them off from the get-go, which I don't think is fair. He's a very mild-mannered, calm, and calculating person, and that's who I always knew he was. Nothing has changed. If he had been Rocky Balboa and flipped the cafe table shouting at them, he would not have been the man I fell in love with. He did exactly what I expected him to do and exactly what I was comfortable with. You may be attracted to other things in men and expect other things, and that's awesome, but not me. I texted him saying I thought it was time to discuss this, and he was back at home not a half hour later. He had been staying with a friend, and the couple of nights we'd had no contact. We sat on our bed to talk because my back is sore from all of the packing, and I wasn't going to force myself to sit at the table. Before we even got to talking, he asked if we could cuddle for a minute. It definitely took some of the weight off my shoulders, and we were able to talk like a couple and not awkward strangers because, regardless of some people's beliefs, we do love each other, and it took me a very long time to feel confident in that fact. Before anyone calls me a doormat again, no, I was still sure I would stick to my ultimatum. The first thing I asked was if he had felt he had enough time to make his decision, and he said he didn't need time. He was very shocked and bewildered at how so much could change in just a week, and how everything he knew was shook up that he couldn't even think and went numb. He did apologize that he didn't take a more defensive stance at the cafe, and he doesn't want to make excuses for it. An explanation was that he genuinely didn't expect such a vitriolic response. He hid the engagement because he knew they weren't over late wife's passing and would be upset at the news. It wasn't like I would feel upset by them not knowing, which I wasn't really. He's known these girls since before they were in double digits, and he would never have thought them capable of it. It came so far out of left field that he froze. I asked him if there was any possibility that either of them had a thing for him, and he looked very confused and disturbed. I said how I've had people tell me it's not uncommon for siblings to do this after loss, and he thought on it. Turns out, you were right. He said the 24-year-old, about 8 months after late wife's passing, made a move and tried to kiss him. He immediately left and told her mother about it. Mother and father are divorced now, but they weren't then. It was years ago, so he had forgotten it ever happened. He said he was sure that wasn't the case now because it had been so long, but I'm not convinced. Not that it matters anymore. He opened up his Facebook and gave it to me to read. 24-year-old had been messaging him, which he ignored. She ranged from telling him off to crying and saying how betrayed the family was to trying to manipulate him against me. He said he was sure that he needed to put them behind him and had been thinking it on and off since he proposed, but couldn't bring himself to do it. After this week, the fire was lit and he knew what he had to do. It was all just abstract until suddenly it was very real. He asked me how I'd been coping and I told him. I felt like I had done everything right, but somehow things turned out worse than if I'd been the jealous type and stopped their contact at the beginning. I tried to be understanding and put in so much effort to be secure in myself and our relationship, only for everything I worked on to be thrown in my face like I was a mistress that was caught cheating with him. He didn't blink the entire time and just listened. He said he should have been more observant and realized I was struggling with this so that he could help me, but I've always been the strong one, so he neglected to, but he'll do better. On the subject of moving, I made it clear that I would not be living in this house any longer than I had to, and he completely agreed. His parents offered to find us a place in their state if we wanted to have more of a support network, and I'm honestly considering it after all of this. They're only a state away from my own family, so we'd be a lot better off. His job is remote, and I should be able to find work there easily enough. I've been in contact with a friend who's a mechanic, and they've quoted me between $1,000 to $2,000 for the damages, but that's an at-cost estimate as a discount. A few people have said to get a real statement and to shop around. The real cost is between $4,000 to $5,000, and that's just for the noticeable damage. My friend thinks they've done something to the engine, so thank goodness I couldn't drive it anywhere. He thinks I may be entitled to a replacement car altogether. If so, I'll be sure to sue for it, and that's not going to be cheap. To finish, I made a point of asking him again if he would cut them off or I had to go. He didn't miss a beat and said that they're no longer going to be a part of his life, even if I decided to leave. He did ask for one last meeting to say goodbye to her parents and to put a close on that part of his life, and to explain to the girls that this is not my fault, but his decision after seeing how cruel they were capable of being. After that, he would block them on everything and move forward. I was completely fine with that. Am I the jerk for not letting my kids ride 4 hours home with their grandmother? Around 1 a.m., there was a terrible crash as my mother-in-law, who's 70, decided to try to navigate our stairs in the dark while wearing a breathing machine. I immediately started calling 911, but my wife, who is a nurse, told me not to call as her mother had no obviously broken bones and didn't want to go. I'm not a medical professional, and it's seldom wise to argue with a nurse or one's wife, but I pressed for them to at least let me drive her to the ER if they refused an ambulance, but all to no avail. This was just a couple of hours ago, and she's now in the bed with an ice pack and a couple of Tylenol. In the morning, she wants to drive home and take my daughter, who's 9, and my son, who's 13, to her place for the week. This has been planned for weeks, and I would have no issues with it, except for the fact that she had fallen down the stairs and could have a concussion. I love her, and I don't want her to drive at all, and I asked her to stay a couple of extra days, but if she insists on going, then I can't stop her. I told my wife I was uncomfortable with them riding with her given the danger, and she thinks I'm being silly, which I don't understand at all, as she's a very competent nurse. I finally told her that everyone could be mad at me, but it simply wasn't an option. I'll take the day off and drive them if I must, but I won't take any chances. Am I the jerk? I'm a nurse, and I'm frankly appalled at your wife's decision to not take her mother to the ER. A 70-year-old who suffers a fall and sustains head injuries could absolutely be checked out in the ER, whether or not your wife, your mother, or the Easter Bunny believe it isn't necessary. If she absolutely refuses to go, then you tell her that your kids won't be staying with grandma at her house. She could be suffering from a concussion. Update. Well, my mother-in-law was alive and conscious when we woke up this morning. My wife stayed up to watch over her through the night. I spoke to my wife this morning and I explained how I felt about everything again. She sheepishly relented and agreed the kids would stay home and that she would encourage her mom to go to the ER. I spoke to my mother-in-law again and asked her to let me take her to the ER, and she shared that her primary reason for refusing medical care was a fear of the cost in doing so. Unfortunately, that's a serious concern for many folks here in the US. Anyways, hearing that, I firmly insisted that she go and told her that we'd cover any costs. She and my wife finally went to the ER, and after several hours and copious tests, it was in fact determined that she had a concussion as well as rib and wrist fractures and soft tissue injuries. My wife was pretty devastated with the diagnosis and was deeply apologetic and remorseful. My mother-in-law will be in the hospital until at least tomorrow. All in all, I'm thankful that things didn't end up worse. The kids only cared about their grandma being okay. Some answers to questions that were asked. My mother-in-law is a retired school teacher on a very limited fixed income, along with my father-in-law. There's no inheritance or other reason my wife would have wished her ill. They have a great relationship. My wife sprang out of bed the moment the accident happened and was almost detached and clinical at the moment, but was later extremely emotional. Her father had a major stroke last year, and we actually just sold our house Friday in order to move closer to her parents to help take care of them in their old age. My parents wasted all their money and now expect me to support them financially. I, 31 female, have been living out of home since I was 18. I left uni with a mid-size amount of debt, but I've managed to pay it off and I'll also save over £8,000 over the last 10 years. I have scrimped and saved to get to this point. My parents are good people and I love them, but they have made some terrible financial decisions over the years. When my grandmother passed, her house was sold and my parents received about £90,000. They treated my brother and I to an amazing Christmas and a lovely holiday. They also renovated parts of our family home. After all this, they still had about £50,000 left and, by their own admission, frittered away the remaining money rather than saving it. By the time I started uni 2 years later, I was told that I would need to take out student loans to pay for my fees. 8 years ago, they told us they were going to sell the family home and downsize to a flat. They managed to sell the house quickly and received about £250,000 for it. But there was nothing on the property market that they liked, so they decided to rent for a while until they found something they did. Within 3 years, all of the money was gone. Again, frittered away with nothing to show for it. Now they're in their 60s and renting for the foreseeable future with only a small pension each. My dad will be forced to retire next year and they can't afford their current rent without his salary. They have asked me for loans multiple times just to tide them over until payday. They do always repay the loans to me, but I've started feeling resentful of giving them money at all. My partner and I are trying to buy a flat, and all of my friends who currently own property have received help from their parents with a deposit. Not only are my parents unable to help me with this, they actively borrow money from my savings on a regular basis. Earlier this week, we were having a family meal for my dad's birthday. My parents were asking my partner and I about our property situation and asked if we would consider buying a 2-bedroom flat so they could move in with us and not worry about rent. I laughed at first, thinking that they were joking, but then realized they were serious. I told them that we wouldn't be doing that, as A, we couldn't afford a 2-bedroom flat, and B, even if we could, it's not my responsibility to house them. My dad argued that he and my mom had provided for me over the years, and now it's my turn to repay them. I told them that I've been virtually on my own since I turned 18, and just because they made poor financial decisions over the years, I shouldn't have to foot the bill. I said that I resent the fact that they could have helped me with my uni and maybe even a flat deposit, but instead, they spent their way into a life of living hand to mouth. This did not go down well. Both of them erupted at me and called me ungrateful. My brother told me that I was being entitled. Even my partner said I was overly harsh. Am I the jerk here? Not the jerk. Your language was harsh, but your parents misspent at least £300,000 according to your post, and now they expect to live for free off you for the next 30 years or so? No. Stop lending them money immediately. Your parents need to learn to live within their, albeit limited, means. Goodbye, Internet. At my last job, my main duty was the IT manager for the entire location, among other duties. I had been there for about 3.5 years at that point, and I was trusted by everyone. If I had something important to say, people listened. During lockdown, while other departments' budgets were getting slashed and employees were getting laid off, I was able to replace a lot of our aging IT infrastructure. At the beginning of my last year there, the owner hires a young, I only tell the truth, even though you won't like it, narcissist as his second in charge. He hired this bonehead as his successor to run this location, while the owner would focus on opening up a second. In the first 3 months, Bonehead upset everyone, to the point where 15 people from various positions leave the company to find other jobs. This is during lockdown, where a lot of people were thankful they had a job, and 15 people were like, I'm going to risk finding another job in the middle of lockdown rather than stay here. He was that bad. As Bonehead started to upset our customer base and our sales started to suffer, we switched over to cost-cutting mode. The owner had largely checked out at this point, so longtime vendors were replaced with friends and family of Bonehead, services were downgraded or cut, pay plans for the sales department were jacked with, and further eroded the morale of the workforce. One day, Bonehead comes to me and tells me to stop doing safety checks and maintenance repairs on our products so sales could post larger sales grosses. I loudly objected and went to the owner, but as the owner is always happy to hear something about making more money, he threw his support behind Bonehead's idea. A few months of this goes by, and after he fired one of my employees on my birthday because he refused to give Bonehead access to the server room, it was restricted to me, owner, and employee. I knew it was time to go. I find a new job, put in my 2 weeks notice, and of course, Bonehead stops my direct deposit on payday, the day after I put my 2 weeks in. I decide it isn't worth working the extra 2 weeks and inform them that I'm out of there, while filing with the state over my wages being withheld. As I'm walking out the door, Bonehead reminds me I'm no longer an employee of the company and not to get involved with the company's affairs and possible legal repercussions if I say anything negative about the company. My new job pays more, less hours, less stress. Fast forward to this Monday, I get a call from my local internet provider. They tell me my internet service bill has gone unpaid for the last 6 months and will get cut off if I don't pay immediately. I log in and see my account is paid. So after a few back and forth, I find out that I'm still the point of contact for my last job's account on their internet service. Remembering what was told to me when I left, I just informed them I could not get involved as I no longer work there. They asked me for an updated point of contact. If they cannot get one, they will be forced to suspend their service. I repeated, I'm not allowed by threat of legal action to be involved in their affairs and left it at that. An hour later, a buddy I know who still works there called me and told me they had to stop working as their internet service had shut off. I played stupid, but it took 3 days to restore it. Today I messed up by trying to impress a girl with my amazing cooking skills. So this happened last night and I'm still cringing at the thought of it. There's this girl I've been crushing on for a while now, and I finally managed to ask her out. She said yes, and I decided to invite her over to my place for dinner. I thought, hey, I can cook a decent meal, and girls love guys who can cook, right? Oh boy, how wrong I was. I decided to make us some fancy pasta dish I saw on one of those cooking shows. You know, the kind where they use words like al dente and reduction to make it sound like they're doing some next level stuff. I went all out, bought the ingredients, and even got a little bottle of wine to set the mood. Fast forward to the evening. She arrives, and I'm already sweating bullets. I start cooking, trying to play it cool, like I'm some sort of culinary genius. She's sitting at the counter watching me, and I can feel the pressure mounting. I'm chopping onions like a madman, trying to impress her with my knife skills, when I accidentally got my finger. It started to bleed, and I'm trying to play it off like it's no big deal. She's clearly concerned, but I assure her it's just a flesh wound. I wrap my finger in a paper towel and soldier on like the culinary warrior I am. I toss the pasta into the boiling water, and in my haste, I forgot to set a timer. No biggie, I think. I'll just wing it. Meanwhile, I'm trying to make small talk, but my mind is racing, and I'm pretty sure I'm just spewing out random facts about pasta and Italian cuisine. She's nodding along, probably questioning her life choices at this point. As I'm stirring the sauce, I realize I haven't tasted it yet. I grab a spoon, take a taste, and it's saltier than the Dead Sea. I must have mistaken the salt container for the sugar one in my nervous state. Panicking, I remember reading somewhere that adding a potato can help absorb the excess salt. So I grab a potato, peel it, chuck it into the sauce like it's some sort of magical salt-absorbing grenade. I finally decide to check on the pasta, and it's turned into a mushy, overcooked mess. At this point, I'm ready to admit defeat, but I figure I've come this far, so I might as well see it through. I drain the pasta, plate it up, and pour the sauce over it, potato and all. I set the plates down, trying to hide my shame, and we dig in. The first bite is a disaster. The pasta is a soggy mess. The sauce is still saltier than a sailor's vocabulary, and the potato is just sitting there, mocking me. She's trying to be polite, but I can see that she's going to need a gallon of water to wash down this culinary catastrophe. I refuse to admit defeat, so I muster up the most convincing smile I can and say, Bon appetit! She hesitates for a moment, then takes another bite, clearly trying to be polite. I can see the fear in her eyes, but I just keep shoveling the salty, soggy disaster into my mouth, pretending like it's the best thing I've ever had. As we continue eating, I try to salvage the situation by making more small talk, but it's clear that this meal has absolutely ruined the evening. She's giving me one-word answers and nervously glancing at the door, probably planning her escape route. Finally, she can't take it anymore. She puts down her fork, looks me dead in the eye, and says, "I'm sorry, but I just remembered I have an early morning tomorrow. I should probably get going." I can see the relief wash over her face as she stands up, and I know I've royally messed up. I walk her to the door, trying to play it cool, like I'm not a complete and utter fool. She gives me a half-hearted hug and says, "Thanks for dinner. It was interesting." And with that, she's gone, leaving me alone with my salty, soggy pasta and bruised ego. Bro, admit defeat to the girl next time and order delivery. Don't force your date to eat a trash meal. Where your real mess up was here is that you didn't realize that the effort is worth more than the result. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.